Welcome, everyone. I'm very, very happy to invite for our next BTCFi Believer session, Native Believers. Blaise, my old friend, and we did many projects together. But before talking about the project, I want himself to introduce himself and tell about his experience, and we will explore very interesting initiatives that we've been discussing recently and what led to those initiatives throughout our experience. Blaise, please introduce yourself to our community.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Hey, Robert. Thanks for having me on. Glad to be here today. So, yeah, a little bit about me. I've primarily been in technology my entire career. So, everything from, working with major consulting firms to Fortune 500 companies, then to venturing out on my own, and then kind of segued into crypto all the way back in 2017. So, I've been full time in the space since then. And, primarily focused on near protocol, but have since then expanded to Bitcoin and Base as well. So have some projects running over there as well.
So you're a true OG in NEAR, right? You were participating in the early testnets. You're from the very beginning, well-known community member, well-known validator. But more than that, you are also very early in Bitcoin. Tell me about you. How did you start with Bitcoin?
Yes, I heard about Bitcoin really way back in the day. Obviously, like I mentioned, I've been in technology and was running a digital marketing firm at the time and heard of Bitcoin. So decided to look into it and started mining it on basically my desktop computer at that point. So mined about a quarter of a Bitcoin. Of course, I used it a couple years later. And then, I've been really active, set up a Ethereum miner as well. So mined Ethereum for a while and then found Near and kind of jumped into there. So no, I've been in the space active for quite some time. But yeah, it was really good to find Bitcoin and really love the thought of Bitcoin, of decentralization, creating something that basically anyone has the ability to get access to and hopefully, removing centralized control. That's really the goal. And to date, it still is somewhat in that perspective, but we'll have to see where the future goes.
Absolutely. So, Bitcoin is this most powerful asset. Not many people had an opportunity to mine Bitcoin. So you are one of the few. And doing it on your own computer, that must be really exciting. So I want firstly maybe here to talk about Cheddar. Cheddar is a project close to my heart, but it's your project. It's you dedicated a part of your life to it. I want to hear more about it because I think it will be a nice segue what I want to talk later on in the context of believers. So tell me your original vision of Cheddar.
Yeah.
How did you envision it? And then maybe we will talk about the execution.
Yeah, so back in the early days of Near, and of course, because you were there, Robert, we were all looking for things to, products to build, ideas to come up with to really build upon a Near protocol. And one of the things that I had as a thought one day is that as we're talking about tokens utility, the word cheddar is used here in America frequently to refer to money. Now, that isn't the end goal of what cheddar became, but that's kind of what gave me the initial idea. Okay, we got all these new tokens, or we can create these tokens with this Net 141 standard. But what can we actually do with them? What would be a use case that we could put together? So the next idea was about loyalty and utility. So how do we build a token that has utility, that has some loyalty behind it? So Cheddar actually started as a yield farm on Near. So basically, it was a way to support other projects in the ecosystem. So people would come to the Cheddar yield farm and they would stake other tokens from our ecosystem partners and they would be able to farm Cheddar. So it was a little bit of a boost to those other projects to give visibility, but also to give utility to those projects' tokens so they just weren't sitting idle. People could actually do something with them. So we ran the yield farm for a while and we kind of learned the pros and cons of that. Then we started to think about, okay, now people have Cheddar, what can they actually do with it? And so we started kind of tinkering around with launching games and NFTs and creating that utility layer for Cheddar. And so that's kind of where Cheddar has been, is it moved from a yield farm to more of a, a fun and engaging place for people to play the maze game that we have, interact with NFTs, and play some other games that we have as well. And actually, you can see Chetty, the mascot of Cheddar, behind me there. But yeah, we
I
just
love it.
actually, yeah, we launched our ordinal during BTC 25 on Bitcoin. So Chetty now is on the Bitcoin blockchain as well. Limited edition, 100 Chettys out there. But yeah, no, exciting project that continues to live on for about 4 years now.
That's a long, right? So Cheddar started as this community project, but more than that, it's about like, a lot of tokens, yes, the meme coins didn't have utility. The vision of Cheddar was, if I remember correctly, yes, be that meme coin, but to be the ecosystem activator. Yes, so
Yeah,
it's this. Remember, we were talking about it early on when we were thinking about what we can do with it. The main feature was this loyalty. What do you think about
correct.
the loyalty? How can you maybe to our listeners describe what's the idea of the loyalty in terms of community and how Cheddar was about to solve it?
Yeah, so loyalty, it's an interesting, dynamic that takes place. And it actually, for the most part, has not come to full fruition yet in Web3. So, I would say loyalty, but loyalty is something where, the big challenge we looked at with Cheddar is that, you have this systemic issue in Web3 where communities jump to the next new chain launching or the next protocol launching. And so they leave this cascade of projects behind. And our idea was, well, what if we could create some symmetry between different projects and, create a little bit of stickiness or a little bit of glue so that, if you stayed loyal to the projects you were a member of their community and you stayed within the Cheddar ecosystem, you'd be rewarded. So we've always been giving out Cheddar as a loyalty reward to any of our partners. They've launched the Cheddar token on their yield farms. We had rewards on refinance as well that were going out to the community. So we had a lot of ways that we were distributing Cheddar. And then we also thought about ways, okay, now that we have this loyalty token, how do we give utility to it? So bringing that Cheddar back into the treasury by launching an NFT line where you could pay with Cheddar for that NFT line and creating some of that utility. But I think in terms of loyalty, it's still an open conversation on how you really make that sticky in this web of L1s and L2s and different protocols and chains and DeFi protocols. So it's still an open narrative.
Yeah. So many projects succeeded just doing nothing and pumping them the meme coin. Cheddar had we had big community, right? I remember that the vision was really amazing. Yes, because we were really connecting the meme coin narrative with utility, with community building. This farming idea that people were engaging and getting more Cheddar. It was a very fair launch. However, yes, the near community didn't get into it. I probably not sure if now from historical perspective, when I think about it, maybe it was a mistake, like that the community was wrong. Yes, we didn't have that the right ecosystem to launch it. What do you think about it? I want to talk more about community and what the aspects that like make something make successful or not successful.
Yeah, so when you look at the Web3 community now, primarily most of the community activation, community activity that you see out there, you see this kind of big push things launching. There's lots of activity, and you see all these people showing up. But in general, people are looking for ways to earn, right? And that's really what the Web3 community is about primarily. Now, there are people that want to support protocols that are interested in decentralization, but the large majority of people are looking to earn, they're looking for yield, they're looking for opportunities to, contribute and then receive rewards for those contributions. And that's kind of the direction we move Cheddar into, is contributing and being rewarded in some facet. But yeah, I think, overall, yeah, the near ecosystem and the community there, it just has not had the growth that other ecosystems have. And if Cheddar had been launched on a different protocol, maybe it would have had a lot more fanfare and success. But there was a sizable community at some point. But once you stop the rewards, right? Once you kind of taper down the amount of emissions that you're putting out, which we did, then you see that community tends to dry up a little bit, and you've got to have other activities or other activations to keep them engaged. So, yeah, that was the idea behind the loyalty network, is that we'd always be bringing in new projects, right, for that community to stay activated with. But it was really a side project for us. It was really for the community to support them. So it never had 100% of my attention. It was definitely a side project and still is to this day.
Yeah, I really love the vision of Cheddar. I would really I want to see it succeed. So how would you frame the principles, let's say, the very meme-oriented current? Okay, let's maybe take a step back. So, doing so much in Near, why we haven't seen any successful meme coin on Near? There were many tries, there were many NFT issuance, right? Why it didn't happen? Why there's no community that can, build something in Near, while we have many of them in Solana, predominantly in Ethereum, and the chains like Base and so on.
Yeah, I think primarily what you're looking at is it's likely the makeup of the community, right? So really, it's community that drive these things. So it's having the right players there. And there were a couple of semi-successful launches, but Black Dragon was probably the biggest meme coin on Near for a while, and that had some success. There was Nico, that was another meme coin that was, I would have
I
called
remember
that a
Nico.
really big success. Yeah. So there's Nico, there's Black Dragon, and a few others, but they just didn't have the volume that all these other coins had, because there wasn't a large enough community behind those memes. There's not a large enough community on the Near ecosystem to really get behind those coins, and that's because really a lot of the narrative had been focused on builders, focused on building the tech, instead of really 100% growing the community. And we did lots of experiments. We did NDC, right? That tried to accomplish that, where it was community-led governance with a $20 million treasury. You obviously helped build that to see if we could activate and grow the community, but that experiment was shut down after one cycle. So that's kind of where the Near community is. It's always been a really tight-knit, kind of close group of people, but in terms of it being large like these other ecosystems, it just hadn't grown.
Yeah, so for the context, Blaze is really a believer in near tech. He spent so much time being a validator, being influencer, right? One of his missions was taking on building this near digital collective, which is a top-down approach for how to grow the ecosystem, how to grow the communities, how to make sure that the whole amazing tech of near can apply to builders, to users, right? Rather than this, top-down partnerships that actually didn't bring much to near. So that was a very bold mission, and you become a leader into that. Unfortunately, yes, for probably similar reasons that Cheddar didn't succeed and DC didn't succeed, because the community was we didn't have, let's say, so the way I see it, yes, we didn't have a builders-oriented community. We have a community that was maybe like more yapping rather than being constructive. With all respect, of course, yes, because they're amazing people, amazing builders, but maybe the gravity was not the right one. So that's my take on that. What's your take? What's your major take on the, let's say, healthy and growing community?
Yeah, so the takeaway from NDC, which was a bottoms-up approach, just to kind of make that clear to the audience here, but it was really about grassroots and getting grassroots momentum and growth. The challenge was that when you're trying to empower a grassroots movement and you have a top-down kind of funnel organization that has been used to funding, large enterprises or trying to find corporate deals or things of that nature, and we're talking about near foundation primarily, it was really a struggle to turn some of that power over to the community. And we thought we had gotten it done the way that we set up the treasury and those things to let the community really iterate and grow. But at the end of the day, the failure, when you walk away and you look at it, it was kind of twofold. But I'll say that the primary failure overall was that the values weren't shared. When you have a large community, and it's a diverse community that's worldwide, the shared values amongst the members in that community, the social norms, all of those things, they're not the same, right? So if you're talking about a community in Africa versus a community in maybe Eastern Europe, they don't necessarily have the same ideals. So putting those communities together and assuming that they could all collaborate and work with one another was the primary mistake, I think, in the end. So that's kind of what we're focused on now, or I'm focused on now with Balloon, is shifting that up a little bit, which we'll get to in a little bit here. But yeah, I would say that that's the primary, that the incentives weren't aligned and the values were not shared amongst the entire collective.
Yeah, 100%. So incentives are, this is a big problem, because how we can get the stick incentives? We were talking about the, stickiness right before recording, starting recording here. So we can touch on that as well. I wouldn't say, it's just a failure. It's a lot of learning, having that not mature community and trying to grow it. It's very challenging, right? We can see that the Ethereum communities, yes, they have been forming around many initiatives like the ETH events, ETH local events. The network of those events is basically immense compared to anything else in the world. Yes. So Ethereum managed to build the big mindshare and the distribution of money, right? That can really benefit different communities, builders, that they can work together and have that that healthy ecosystem. As Solana did as well, right? Also, of course, with Hub of Money, back in days coming from FTX, the recognition from FTX. So having those learnings, how if you were about to start Cheddar again, how would you do it?
Yeah, I think where we're starting to move in Web3 is the idea that the Web3 community is very small in reality, right? When you look at the metrics out there, maybe you have 1 to 2 million people here in Web3 total that are real users. The rest are typically metrics that are gamed or potted, right, to make things look good. So maybe you have 5 million users out here, right, total, that are real. So the market's very small. So I think what we've got to do now with Web3 is we have to take more of a Web2 approach, and we need to find out how we can solve real problems for people, thinking about, consumers. How do we get consumers onboarding to Web3 in seamless fashion, right? And that would probably be where I would aim to start, is building something that sure can cater to the Web3 audience, realizing that that audience is very small. It's not very sticky. It's hard to get them to stick around unless they're have the right incentive alignment. And right now, Web3 incentive alignment is relative to how big your wallet is typically, right? So you don't have a large wallet, you're going to jump from project to project to try to make some earnings. But if you have a large wallet, maybe you're going to pick a protocol or a couple and be engaged there. So I think it's really growing this Web3 community overall is the key.
That doesn't sound very healthy, right? Like if you basically qualify everything by the wallet size,
Yeah,
that's not
yeah, it's
basically
the wrong model.
how it should work. All right.
Correct.
So here, because the main subject is this community building, with the perspective of this, few projects that we've been researching and building. Let's move on. What is, in your opinion, how like the success factors of Solana? Let's talk a little bit about Solana here.
Yeah, so Solana, the success factors, you already hit the primary nail on the head, was FTX, right? So FTX really bolstered that ecosystem. Like we talked about, it was incentive alignments, it was rewards, right? So Serum going into Solana was the thing that made Solana, right? So they had a big reward system. And then on top of that, the Solana Foundation was definitely putting lots of funds into building their community, everything from, giving grants to doing those Solana houses to things like that. So they had a real focus on attracting builders that could actually execute. And so they were able to grow that mind share, because this is all about mind share and stickiness, right? And so they were able to grow that mind share through FTX and through some of the incentives that they were doing to get that mass adoption.
All right. So now, how would you describe Bitcoin community? Let's talk about Bitcoin now.
Yeah, so on the Bitcoin community side, it's a little bit different. You have a lot of OGs, right? So there's two segments to the Bitcoin community. There are all the kind of the old OGs of Bitcoin that have been there, that maybe mined it. They were very early. They helped build the community. They call them laser eyes, that kind of community there. And then you've got this new fledgling community that has just started to come up and coming with ordinals and runes. And so there's actually more growth on that community side, obviously. But even still, then the Bitcoin community is very small at this stage. And the reason is, it's hard to get into Bitcoin. The technology isn't very easy to use. It's hard to find yield, as you know, and some other things. So it's still not very usable from a user experience perspective. Now that's improved significantly. Will the Bitcoin community ever grow to be massive? I think it will be more of a multi-chain community that has Bitcoin at its heart.
Interesting, because I have the same thesis, right? For me, it's hard to identify the Bitcoin community. Yeah, I can call out, for example, a few people who are Bitcoin OGs, but there is no community. If I ask them, what community do you belong to?
It's pretty tight knit.
So we don't see that, this community effect that we see in Solana, for example, in Bitcoin, right? But Bitcoin mindshare is much, much bigger.
Yeah, no, I mean, Bitcoin, the communities, the largest communities in Bitcoin are Dog, right, which is the meme coin token, has a very large community. And then next to that, it's some of the big ordinals, right? So you got the puppets and some of those. Pizza Ninjas has a pretty nice community, right? So there's a few of those ordinals that have very large communities, but really, yeah, it's pretty small. It's pretty small. But like I said, overall, go ahead.
Just communities are not active. I wouldn't even call them communities. This is just, people who are, chilling about some event or about something, but this is not a group of people that, build or, contribute to something. This is but, a group of people who are chilling about something. So not even chilling, but chilling.
Yeah, they're holders, right? So they're part of their holder community. Yeah. So they chill with each other for the most part. But yeah, so that's kind of what Bitcoin has going on, and they really want to grow their community over there. Of course, every protocol does, but I think that the challenge there is the technology, the block time, right? So then you had all the L2s spin up over there, which hasn't worked very well because it's mind share, it's adoption, right? And to get
Yeah,
that,
we don't see
yeah,
actually any community about, like, we, if you think about, community as, as this great examples from Ethereum, from Solana, even from Near, Bitcoin is special, yes, because people buy Bitcoin not because of the community. People buy Bitcoin because of the mindshare, of the recognition. This is very clear, right?
yeah,
People who buy Bitcoin, they don't expect that there will be applications on Bitcoin. In the same way as you buy gold, you don't expect, you just buy gold to sell it, 3 times more expensive.
yeah.
That's the
So
mission.
store of value, or yeah, store of value is what they're looking at, yeah, or commodity, whichever they see it in. One of those two lights typically.
Right.
Stock, commodity, or store of value. It's kind of up in the air which one it'll be, right? But it's probably more aligned to a commodity, like gold, right? So yeah,
So, that's for the Bitcoin, but then, for builders, they need a community, they need the users, they need the customers, they need people who will be, shilling it, not chilling, but shilling, right?
correct.
So this is totally different mechanism, different process. So how do you see this evolving in Bitcoin? How do you see it evolving in Bitcoin L2s? How would you compare it to, let's say, to Near?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is going to have a real challenge growing those communities. Even on the L2 side, I think it's going to be a challenge to really have growth there. I don't think that, I think you'll see the de facto standard come back to that Bitcoin's a store of value, and you might have some specific tokens or ordinals that will, have some value and be worth quite a bit. Like there will be less things that are valuable on Bitcoin, but the things that are valuable will be worth more value um, per capita than what you might see everywhere else. But I just don't see that the community from the grassroots active community, native community there. I don't see now the Bitcoin conference. There were tons of people there. I mean, I think their target was 25,000. There was every bit of 25,000 people there, right? So it was very busy. But when you're looking at who showed up to the conference, the community was pretty small, and you had a lot of corporations, bankers, Congress people. So you have this whole thing where now corporate and government is getting involved. Nation states are getting involved in Bitcoin, and that's where you're going to see the growth there. And they're not going to be in this grassroots chat room talking, right? So it's a different
Mm-hmm.
audience.
Absolutely. So this actually resonates very well with our thesis. I didn't thought about it in that way, but now when we talk about it loudly, our
Yeah.
thesis is that Bitcoin finance will grow, not in Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin doesn't need that, right? As a chain, as an ecosystem, Bitcoin is basically that mining facility to create Bitcoins and to custody them in a trustless way. But Bitcoin finance is the application level, and this application level, in my opinion, it will grow in L1s, not in this Bitcoin side chains, because again, Bitcoin is not meant to be this execution framework, right, for side chains and so on, and for L2s, but for strong L1s that will provide strong trust, security, and decentralization properties. Yeah, so technically being trustless and efficient. And in my opinion, yes, the best ones today we have definitely Sui. Um, so so that's our thesis. And and when you think from that perspective, the let's say the community about some asset, let's say, I don't know, Tesla. Yes, there are a bunch of people who love Tesla because they love the tech, they love the innovation, some narrative about AI and so on, even though it's not the best one, but they get the mind share. These communities are, those are internet communities. They are not formed in the Tesla factories.
Correct.
They are formed, there are users that, build stuff around it. Yes, then you probably have people like, let's say, India, that in India, there's tons of people who, like their mission is that you need to own gold. They don't care about mining. I mean, like the mining facilities. Just buy the gold on the stock, and then keep it in their family treasuries. And then there is the whole case of inheritance that it's kind of wealth building. So here's the same. It's like Bitcoin community will not be formed around Bitcoin mining. It will be formed, in my opinion, around Bitcoin finance, about social apps that are powered by Bitcoin. And in the Web3, if you talk about Web3 native applications, those will be built on this, amazing chains that are efficient, have builders and have users. Yeah. So when you already have a users, we need builders, of course. So yeah, that's actually a very good summary here about Bitcoin finance thesis and Bitcoin community thesis. I need to update it on our native. So let's talk, because we were trying to build something with Bitcoin community. So the user project that you started with a couple of friends who joined the Bitcoin Startup Lab. Tell me about your experience with Yuzo. How did you guys see it? What's your learning? So most importantly, tell us about your thesis, about your mission, and the learning as you have it now.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, just to kind of circle back and cover off just real quickly what you were saying. No, you hit the nail on the head, and I put a post out about this on X yesterday. But what you were basically saying is that the protocols are not going to be what's going to accrue the value. The enterprises are the applications and the services that are going to build on these protocols that people are going to begin to gather around. And that's really how Web3 is going to grow for real. These protocols in of themselves, they're the platform, or they're the product, or not the product, but they're kind of like the base layer that people got to build upon. So it will be applications and services that will really have the true growth. Yeah. So in terms of Yuzo, our vision was really about changing the narrative with what was going on in Bitcoin around ordinals. Primarily what happens with the ordinals now is you go out, you do a one-time mint, and you get this PFP, and it may be valuable or it may dump over the next couple of months, and you've now got this pretty picture. And so it was really about the same idea that we've always been talking about: how you bring utility, how do you bring engagement, right? So the thought process originally with Yuzo was that we're going to make these ordinals upgradable, so that whether you have an existing NFT line or an existing ordinal line, they call them ordinals, but they're NFTs, as most people know. Whether you have an existing ordinal or if you want to launch a new ordinal, you got to keep that community engaged, because they have the same challenge over there that every protocol does. You go through the mint, there's a hype, the price dumps, everybody leaves, and then the project's dead. So it's about creating utility. So now taking and making these ordinals upgradable by allowing the community to upgrade the traits, to vote on traits, to do things like that, so that you could bring some dynamic capability to that. And that's really where Yuzo started from, was that original idea. We did a lot of interviews with projects, ordinal projects, and across the Bitcoin ecosystem to say, what are your pain points? And that was one of the solution sets that came out. Now, I'm no longer officially part of the Yuzo team anymore. I let the young gents over there that started with me take that project over, and they're doing a fantastic job. They've moved into now having some AI elements where you can, with no code, generate an ordinal collection. And now they've even pivoted once more that they want to kind of create a launch pad for ordinals and runes, and marry those together, I believe, so that you've got kind of a pump fund on Bitcoin. So they're working on that now. But yeah, the original idea was solving the age-old problem that Web3 has, and that's how do you make these users, how do you make these communities more sticky?
Okay, interesting. So what's your learning?
Yeah, the learning is that, when you look at the end of the day, the communities are really small, right? And so what we walked away with, kind of the net is what I walked away with Yuzo, whether it be on Bitcoin L1 or Bitcoin L2s. When we looked at it, there wasn't enough volume, right? So there's just not enough volume there to
Why
really
there's not
keep
enough
some
volume?
float. Because the volume for Bitcoin, like you were saying, or we were discussing earlier, it's not in like actively buying and trading these ordinals or these runes. The volume in Bitcoin is people buying and trading the asset itself, right? So those transactions are not flowing through, a lot of those ordinals and runes at this time. And in addition, the volume of transactions on Bitcoin overall is just not very high, right? It's 10-minute block times. You can't push through that many transactions. So that's why you
Exactly.
have to look at it.
Okay. So okay, the reason is very well. You should start using now on Sui.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. Okay. So leaving user, you are starting balloons. Why balloons? What's your motivation about balloons? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when I looked at NDC, and kind of after walking away from NDC, I thought about what our challenges were there. And I kind of addressed this point earlier, but the challenges were that, the people, the community members didn't have the same shared values, right? So what we have right now, primarily in Web3, is a pump and dump scheme, right? So all the narratives are around pumping a value and getting out the top before everyone else. The narratives are about whales and insiders. And so I started having, once again, the same thought that I had with Cheddar, but just again, how do we get it to the point where these grassroots communities can create their own value, right? How do you actually create value? Value is created over time, where Web3 is primarily about, creating value instantly and overnight, which so far we've seen that value doesn't really hold up well for the most part. So the idea behind Bloom is giving communities the ability to launch a pod, to launch basically a community, have members join that community. But to join the community, you have to deposit, to join the community. And then the community pools their funds together, and then they're able to, vote on how those funds should be used. So it's about not just about joining a community and being there extracting value, but it's about you putting a little bit of value in, and then collaboratively and collectively figure out how you're going to manage and grow that value over time, whether that be via the AI agents that we're contemplating managing part of the treasury, or via a liquidity pool. So right now, the concept in Balloon is that there's no LP by default. It's just treasury plus, the community itself. It starts very small, and then you go from there. So that's the overall idea. With one more caveat, one of the challenges that we also saw in NDC was that the value extraction was one challenge. The other challenge was that the values were not shared. So people did not share the same values. So the thing about these balloon communities is, when you join a community, you join with a set of shared values that you're going to agree to abide by. And you're looking for people really to join your community that believe the same things you do. And where you have shared ideas and shared values, then you can have shared success. So that's the idea behind Balloon.
Okay, and do you think it may work with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think it could work with Bitcoin. The idea with really Balloon is that it would be multi-chain, so you would use all assets. Of course, we need a yield component there as well, so we want to put yield on those treasuries, right?
Native
So
can
they
provide. That's
exactly,
native where it comes from.
yeah. So be yield, right? Be yield on Balloon treasuries. That's the magic right there.
It is. So Believers, right? So Believers, our community activation is this stewardship program to join the forces, combine the forces, to really make Bitcoin finance happen, to make Bitcoin and social apps happen in a Web3 native way, not in some dumbass, side chains, but in a true Web3 native way. So how this will play out? Are you a believer? Is Balloons a part of? Do you see Balloons being steward in the Believers?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely a believer in what you're working on there, in the Believers, along with Be Yield and Native overall.
What excites you? Tell me what excites you about in general the whole narrative
I think
of Believers.
the narrative of Believers, again, it comes back to that core principle of finding people that want to be like-minded and want to contribute, right, and be a part of something that isn't just for themselves, but it's for a greater purpose. It's about unifying, yield across all of these ecosystems with Bitcoin, with native, right, and bringing real value to the Web3 community, not just the holders of Bitcoin, but then leveraging that value across the board, across all the communities, really within Web3.
All right. Okay, let's wrap up. That was amazing discussion. Thanks for having you, and I want to have more of you in our Believer sessions. And looking forward to forming Bitcoin community with Balloons. Maybe just before we close it, would you like to launch Bitcoin Cheddar?
Yeah, we definitely envision bringing Cheddar to Bitcoin, and that's something that we'd really love to do. So definitely am still interested and hopeful that we can work together, work with Native to get that accomplished, and get that launch on Bitcoin.
Thanks a lot. Any closing notes that you want to share with our community, with other believers?
No, thanks for having me on. But a lot of the messaging is saying that, if you're a believer right now, you're early. This is really a movement that Robert's working to create with the native team. So it's a good time to join and jump in.
Absolutely. We will share a few notes about this podcast, and hope to see you soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye.